His name used to be Adrian Vale. At least that was the name attached to the man who stood in the back row of an overcrowded university auditorium on a humid evening in late October, clapping with mechanical precision, while the woman he had financed, defended, and emotionally carried for nearly a decade crossed a stage in crimson doctoral robes. He was 46 then, though the mirror had been insisting he looked older for years. The applause that night felt distorted, like it was traveling through water before reaching his ears. He had mortgaged a commercial property he once owned outright, liquidated investment accounts, and quietly dissolved a thriving hardware supply business to fund her research in cultural theory and institutional dominance. 8 years of tuition transfers, rent payments, conference flights, publishing fees. 8 years of living as a shadow sponsor to her ascent. She had relocated nearly 1,000 miles away for her program, returning perhaps once every 6 weeks, each visit shorter than the last. Adrian had stayed behind in their suburban house with his son from his first marriage, a boy named Rowan who was 17, and learning too early what emotional absence looked like. Rowan had chosen deep blue orchids that evening because she once declared blue symbolized intellect and restraint. They waited to congratulate Dr. Selene Vale. When her name echoed across the hall, the crowd surged to its feet. She smiled with a brightness Adrian hadn't seen directed at him in years. After the handshake with the department chair and a series of staged photographs, she descended the steps and walked straight toward them. Rowan stood first, holding the flowers out awkwardly. Selene passed him without slowing. She stopped inches from Adrian, reached inside her sleeve and removed a thick envelope. Her eyes were steady, almost serene. "You should have this," she said. He opened it there under the fluorescent lights. Petition for dissolution. Signed that morning, filed in advance. She had orchestrated the ending to coincide with her beginning. Her voice did not tremble when she explained that she required distance to evolve beyond the constraints of domestic expectation. She spoke as if she were delivering a lecture summary. Around them, laughter and cork pops from cheap celebratory champagne filtered in from the lobby. Adrian felt something colder than anger settle into him. It was an internal winter, a quiet calcification. Rowan's grip tightened around his sleeve. The orchid slipped from the boy's hands and scattered across the floor. Adrian did not shout. He did not argue. He removed the pen from his jacket pocket, an anniversary gift from Rowan months earlier, and signed where indicated. Ink on paper. A man reduced to lines and clauses. He handed her copy back and told his son it was time to leave. Behind them, applause resumed for the next graduate, as though nothing had ruptured. They drove through the night without music. The highway hummed beneath the tires in a steady, anesthetic rhythm. Rowan asked once if he was all right. Adrian answered that he would be. The words felt theoretical. He did not tell his son about the cardiologist appointment 3 months prior, the quiet diagnosis of early-stage coronary deterioration brought on by stress and neglect. He had swallowed that information alone because Selene was preparing for her final defense, and he would not burden her. He had been dissolving long before the envelope. They did not return home. Instead, Adrian steered the car toward an unremarkable roadside in nearly 60 miles past their exit, the kind of place that accepted cash and curiosity-free silence. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. They sat on opposite beds, the television casting blue light across their faces while neither absorbed a single image. His phone vibrated 3 times before midnight. The first message suggested they speak calmly. The second accused him of dramatics. The third insisted maturity demanded composure. 12 years condensed into 3 notifications. Adrian powered the device off and placed it face down on the nightstand. Something fundamental had shifted inside him, not explosively but tectonically, plates grinding into new positions. He realized he had lived as infrastructure, unseen, load-bearing, necessary but unacknowledged. The realization was not liberating. It was annihilating. By dawn he had decided on subtraction. Over the next 4 days he initiated a series of deliberate erasures. He contacted his former business associate and finalized the sale of his remaining minority shares in the supply chain venture. He transferred funds from the joint account. money he alone had deposited for years, into a private holding structure created quietly months earlier when doubts first surfaced. He retained an attorney who confirmed the documents she had filed were comprehensive and legally airtight. There would be no contest, no alimony, no shared future liabilities. Clean, the lawyer called it. Adrian found the word obscene. On the fifth morning, he purchased a prepaid phone and destroyed the old SIM card in the motel bathroom sink, crushing it beneath the heel of his shoe. He deleted dormant social media profiles, deactivated professional listings, erased digital breadcrumbs accumulated over decades. Disappearance in a hyperconnected age required intention, but it was achievable with discipline and a willingness to relinquish vanity. Rowan observed the process in silence until finally asking where they were going. Adrian answered that they were going somewhere no one expected them to be. Years earlier, during a rare family vacation before Cellini's academic migration, they had passed through a lakeside municipality called Greyhaven, population just under 4,000 permanent residents. It was forgettable in the best way: one marina, a modest main street, a grocery store that closed at 8. Forgettable meant survivable. They packed only what fit inside the car: clothing, essential documents, a framed photograph Rowan insisted on keeping, and a metal box containing old receipts and ledgers Adrian could not yet bring himself to discard. He left the house key on the kitchen counter without note or ceremony. By the time Cellini realized he was not returning calls, they had crossed 2 state lines. Greyhaven received them without question. They rented a weathered cottage on the outskirts of town from a landlord who valued advance payment over biography. Rowan enrolled in the local high school for his final year. Adrian began walking the perimeter of the lake each morning, studying the water's surface for patterns. Silence in Greyhaven was not empty. It was dense, almost tactile. At the marina he noticed inefficiencies immediately: boats in disrepair, inconsistent rental pricing, accounting practices bordering on negligent. The owner, a widower named Conrad Morrow, confessed over burnt coffee that he was weeks from insolvency. Adrian offered to review the books. 3 afternoons later, he presented a restructuring plan so meticulous it bordered on obsessive. Cost controls, staggered maintenance schedules, revised seasonal pricing, vendor renegotiations. Conrad asked why a stranger would invest that kind of attention. Adrian answered that he needed something to rebuild before he disintegrated entirely. Within months, he acquired a substantial equity position in the marina, channeling capital from the liquidation of his former life. Physical labor steadied him, replacing warped dock boards, recalibrating outboard motors, sanding splintered railings until his palms blistered. Pain in his hands was simpler than the vacuum in his chest. Rowan made the baseball team and began smiling again in cautious increments. Adrian's cardiologist, now a local practitioner in Greyhaven, noted measurable improvement in his blood pressure and inflammatory markers. Stress, when removed at the source, recalibrated the body. Yet internally he remained vigilant, distrust coiled beneath the surface. 2 years passed. The marina turned profitable for the first time in nearly half a decade. Adrian expanded operations, introduced guided fishing excursions, implemented digital booking systems under a limited liability structure that shielded personal assets. A regional developer approached him about consulting on a mixed-use waterfront project. He accepted after a single night of contemplation. Growth, he discovered, felt different when it was not performed for someone else's validation. Rowan graduated and secured a partial athletic scholarship at a state university several hours away. The day he left for campus, Adrian experienced a pang sharper than the divorce, but it was pride laced with grief, not humiliation. He had not failed his son. That distinction mattered. The first sign that the past had begun tracing his outline again arrived in the form of a discreet inquiry. A mutual acquaintance from their former neighborhood appeared at the marina one afternoon, confessing that Cellini had retained a private investigator to locate Adrian. Her academic appointment had unraveled amid allegations of methodological misconduct. A colleague with whom she had been entangled publicly distanced himself when scrutiny intensified. Her professional ascent had stalled, then collapsed. Adrian listened without visible reaction. The news did not ignite triumph. It induced fatigue. He contacted his attorney to confirm that all post-divorce acquisitions were insulated from claim. They were. Weeks later, she arrived in Greyhaven unannounced. Adrian recognized her posture before her face, the hesitation of someone accustomed to commanding rooms now uncertain of reception. She appeared diminished, the polish stripped away. She asked for conversation, for interior space, for the privacy of walls. Adrian declined. They spoke in the open air beside the marina office while customers pretended not to observe. She framed her regret as miscalculation, her losses as misfortune. Adrian noted the absence of remorse for the spectacle she had engineered years earlier. When she invoked the duration of their marriage as evidence of value, he replied that duration without reciprocity was erosion. He asked her to leave. She remained motionless for several seconds before retreating to her rental car. He did not watch her drive away. Some closures required no audience. Her response arrived through legal channels. A claim asserting entitlement to a portion of the marina's valuation on the basis of marital capital contributions. Adrian's attorney dismantled the argument methodically. The timeline alone rendered it untenable. Yet Cellini amplified a parallel narrative online, portraying herself as architect of Adrian's early business growth, insinuating concealed assets and financial deception. For the first time since his disappearance, Adrian stepped into visibility. He published a single statement accompanied by scanned copies of the dissolution filing she had presented at her graduation ceremony. The caption was restrained, factual. He neither insulted nor embellished. The reaction was immediate and seismic. Former neighbors corroborated his financial sacrifices. Ex-employees attested to the sale of his enterprise to fund her doctorate. Even Rowan, now legally an adult, described the night orchids fell to an auditorium floor. Cellini's narrative fractured under collective memory. Within 48 hours, her lawsuit was withdrawn. Adrian invoiced her for legal expenses without commentary. It was not vengeance, it was boundary. Recognition followed in quieter forms. A local paper profiled the marina's revival. A civic committee honored Adrian for economic contribution. At the ceremony, he spoke briefly about reconstruction, about the discipline of beginning again without spectacle. A nonprofit director approached him afterward, proposing workshops for individuals navigating public betrayal and identity collapse. Adrian hesitated before accepting. Speaking about the fracture did not reopen it, it mapped it. In community centers and modest auditoriums, he described the psychology of erasure, how one becomes infrastructure in their own life, how silence can be weaponized, how departure can be reclamation rather than defeat. Attendance grew. Letters arrived from strangers who recognized themselves in the architecture of his story. Rowan, now thriving in collegiate athletics, told him one evening that watching him leave without implosion had redefined strength. Adrian carried that sentence carefully. More than a year later, an attorney contacted him regarding Cellini's sudden death in a vehicular accident. She had left a letter designated for him. He waited until dusk to open it, seated on the dock behind the marina. The pages contained acknowledgments stripped of defensiveness. She admitted to instrumentalizing his devotion, to mistaking admiration for entitlement, to loving the projection of herself more than the partnership they once inhabited. She did not request forgiveness. She requested remembrance of who she had been before ambition metastasized. Adrian read the letter twice and felt an ache that was neither longing nor vindication, but mourning for a version of both of them that had not survived her hunger. He did not attend the funeral. Grief did not require performance. On the anniversary of the graduation that had severed his former life, he carried the original signed documents to the lake, tore them into narrow strips, and released them into the water. The fragments dispersed without drama. His phone vibrated with a message from Rowan, an ordinary update about practice and dinner plans. Adrian replied that life was steady, and for the first time the word did not feel provisional.